Hey everybody, welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. Today we're going to be talking about Taoism and we're going to be talking about the Tao of Happiness. And we have Derek Lin talking about his upcoming book, The Tao of Happiness. Welcome, Derek.
Well, thank you so much, CJ. It's always such a great time when you and I get to talk. We don't
We
have to
do
go
have
often.
fun. We have fun. So I have a question about Taoism because every and would you call I was thinking would you call Taoism a religion?
Well, it began more as a philosophy than a religion.
Okay.
So, in the TaoTe Ching, as an example, there's no mention of the afterlife. There's no pantheon of deities. There's no heaven or hell. There's no hereafter. So it's pretty much primarily concerned about the here and now. How do we live? What is our path in this world?
Mm-hmm.
While we're still alive.
Yeah, it's interesting because it is very different because I was thinking about how is Taoism, the little that I've read, and unfortunately I'm a dilettante, which I know you scold a little bit in your book,
Yes, I do.
but I'm a dilettante. I'm not a dilettante in spirituality, but in Taoism, what I do know is that it seems like the focus is about living your daily life and how you can live it with a sense of openness and ease, which is very different than a lot of other religions that you read. It is more about a life philosophy like yoga than it is about a religion with prescriptive rules.
That's correct, and there's quite a bit of overlap between philosophy and spirituality and religion. Anyway,
Yeah.
the ancient Chinese never really had a clear-cut distinction between those different fields. So there's even temple devoted to Confucius, and he was not really a religious figure at all.
Yeah.
There's annual rituals devoted to him, and
With
that's
incense lighted. Do you think Confucius would come back and go, "What the hey? Like, what are you people doing? Why are incense being lit all over with me as a deity in a big concrete statue?" Because we were just in China 2 summers ago, and there was a whole temple for Confucius and I mean all these different philosophers. What do you think they would
right.
think when they came back and saw all of that?
Yeah, well, it was actually a similar thing with the Buddha as well.
Yeah.
Buddha did not, claim to be divine in any way. He basically what he was an awakened human being. So any human being who awakens is a Buddha.
Hmm.
To Bu is to awake. Buddha is the one who is awake.
Hmm.
So he was not claiming to be divine.
Mm.
So if he were to come back, he would also be like, wait a minute, I now have supernatural powers.
Exactly. How did this happen? And I'm laughing and gold. Like, what are you people doing? Okay. All right. So I want to talk, even though it's not a religion, and I don't even know if these things hold true, but in various philosophies, we have these huge metaphysical questions. How was the world created? Why are we here? Who am I? These are kind of the quintessential metaphysical questions that each philosophy even has their take on. So when you look at Taoism, what are the answers? I'm going to just take these one at a time. So,
Sure.
how was the world created? What would the philosophers either? Is it Chung Tzu? How do you pronounce the name? The one that's covered in your book, The Tao of Happiness.
Those two characters both start out with a Z sound,
Okay.
like zeta, like zero. So
Okay.
it's more like zhuangzi.
Zhuangzi. Okay. Zhuangzi. Okay. And then Lao Tzu.
Correct.
Okay. Got it. So, what would they say? How was the world created?
Well, these are my favorite topics.
Okay.
Love to get into them. I do want to just kind of put a little bit of an intro that just like just like how it is with all the spiritual traditions and belief systems out there, there are so many variations in Taoist beliefs. We have so many Christian sects, we have so many varieties of Buddhism, etc. And in Taoism, it's all decentralized.
Mm,
There's no Vatican of the
right.
Tao. There's no Tao Pope.
Okay.
So there's no Dalai Lama who's gonna say this is what it is in
I
this.
see. Interesting.
So what I can do is that I'm happy to talk about what I think, what
Okay.
makes sense to me from a Taoist
Right.
perspective, while I leave it open and keep in mind that every person that studies and cultivates the Tao will have different answers. And
Okay.
the reason is because the Tao is the path. You have to follow your own path.
Ah, interesting. Okay, so it's really one about you developing your own sense of what it is, and that would be a Taoist approach. No Taoist person would say, this is what it is. It's like, this is what is for me. It's up for you to decide what it is for you.
I get to walk my path. I have
Yes.
to leave you alone so you can walk yours. I can't walk your path for you. Sometimes we can travel together, and that's the fun in life, is that we have these travel companions.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so what, from
with
your perspective, not that you're a deity, although I'm sure you would hope that your wife and children view you that way. Um, what would you say based on all of your reading of Taoist texts, if you were to interpret, and I know it's hard, how would you say the world was created?
well, so many different religions in the world have creation myths. And some are very colorful about how the world was created.
Uh-huh.
When a particular deity sneezed, well, probably not sneezed, but had a dream, had a
Right.
thought, had a breath that became a world, or spoke, let there be light, etc. So in the Tao, it isn't like that. It isn't mythological in that sense. There is, however, an abstract description about the patterns of creation that applies to universal creation as well. That is in chapter 42 of the TaoTe Ching. So that chapter starts out saying, from the Tao comes the One, or One arises from the Tao, or Tao gives rise to the One. Can be translated in different ways. The One gives rise to the Two. The Two gives rise to the Three, and the Three give rise to the myriad things, meaning everything. So that's abstract enough that people will look at that and have a huge question mark,
Right.
On their heads. What do you mean the One gives rise to the Two? What is all that? Now, the One is unity. When it's the unity, like
Oneness,
universe.
I'm one with you, that kind of thing.
Correct. The oneness. Now, the Tao is the zero. The Tao is the void. It's the nothing that gives rise to everything. So the Tao it gives rise to the One. Then, the oneness gives rise to the Two. That's polarizing into yin and yang.
Yeah, the duality of the world.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Now, the two are not static. They actually will revolve. They actually will interact with one another. They get into each other's space. They dance around. Think about the interactions of men and women. So those interactions, those movements, that motion, the dance, that's the third factor. The third factor is change or transitions. So think about I Ching. That is known as the Book of Change, and that actually predates the Tao Te Ching by like 2,000 years roughly.
Wow,
It's
okay.
from about 4,800 years ago. So change is important. So the two would change. The interaction gives rise to many other things. So that is just like, when we can say, well, the male and female animals, they come together, they interact, and suddenly there's offspring.
Right.
There's the next generation, which will then in turn beget even more, future generations until the entire planet is covered with life. So,
Interesting. That's fascinating. So that really how the world was created is really through the story of creation itself. And how did the Taoists come up with this? Is it, I just imagine TaoTe Ching as like this person walking, or the Lao Tzu walking around a field and just observing nature from this kind of very present way, and observing the patterns of nature and saying, I'm not sure I mean, do we actually know how the Taoist philosophers came up with this philosophy?
we have pretty good ideas.
Yeah.
Now, Lao Tzu, oftentimes in the West, he's seen as the founder of Taoism, but in fact, he was a summarizer, not a founder.
Oh, fascinating. Okay, got it. He was
So
a good scribe.
exactly, and what
Okay.
he did, he collected all this information. He had a job as the librarian for a king, so he had access to all kinds of information. At that time, beliefs in the Tao, the philosophies were already quite well known and have been around for thousands of years. And remember, there's 2,000 years between his time and the time prior to him, the time of I Ching. So he collected all that together. He summarized them into what we know as the TaoTe Ching today. Now, if we go back to the earlier time, it was all based on observation of nature. It goes back to actually hunter-gathering days, even before agriculture. So in 5,000 years ago, usually you will have, hunters getting ready to go forth and, hoping for good catch that they can bring back to the tribe so that they can have a feast. So for them, it was imperative to try to figure out what kind of weather they will encounter, because it may be away for days at a time. They live off the land, they camp in the wilds and so forth. So one particular man, Fuxi was his name, he had this intuition and he had observations of nature. So he developed his own way of foretelling the weather. So all these hunters, knowing, over time, they realized how accurate he was. So they came by to see him. And before they went forth on a hunt, they would say, well, is today a good day to leave? Should we wait a few days, wait for the storm to pass? Or should we go now so that we won't be caught in bad weather? And he would give them very accurate advice. So many of these hunters came by that he took to not just, answering questions to everybody, repeating the same information. So he took to writing on tree bark. He makes marking. This is like the earliest weather station.
Yeah.
He made markings for the hunters so they can check that and realize that, well, if I go off in this direction, this is what's going to happen, etc. So this is the beginning of observations of patterns in nature.
He's almost like an oracle. You know how oracles are kind of, they're actually divining what's happening and kind of intuiting around their surroundings. That's what it sounds like to me. I don't know if Fu Ching would like the word oracle. Probably not.
He was seen as an oracle.
He was? Okay.
Dang,
I got it!
They didn't know that there's actually sort of a science or patterns that one can figure out using reason. So they just imagined that he has supernatural ability to foretell the weather. Now, for him, he also he made other realizations. He discovered that he came to the realization that, well, just as it is in heaven, so it is among people, so it is on earth.
Like as above, as below.
Right.
That's what they would say in shamanism. But was it Fu Ching that was the originator of that idea?
Fuxi.
Fuxi
was the name?
Was he the originator of that, as above, so below?
That was the idea. So he figured out that by understanding heavenly patterns, he can apply a lot of these patterns to human affairs.
Okay, got it. So going back to the kind of metaphysical questions, how was the world created? There was also who are we? So what would Fuxing?
It's spelled in different ways. So let me provide that spelling for all the listeners. Fu is F-U, and Xi, the next character in the old system was HSI, Xi. In the new system, in the new Pinyin romanization system, is XI.
XI, Fuxi. Okay, got it, Fuxi. So what would Fuxi say about who are we?
He didn't actually address that question. Okay. So the sages did not spend a whole lot of time talking about, who we are. I can offer a thought to all the listeners. So question often comes up, what about the soul? What about the spirit?
Right.
So there is no specific mention of a soul-like entity, although something like that we can see in the idea of a true self. So what is your true self? And, I like to sort of take a moment and invite everyone to think about that. A true self, the way that I'll define it is very specific, but also very simple. It's the you that never changes, no matter what else about you changes. Therefore, your true self is not your body. Your body cannot be the true self because your body is constantly going through one change or another, And if you're me, gain weight, lose weight,
Yeah, so your true self is the part that is enduring, whether we recognize it or not, because we can spend a lot of life not knowing even our true selves, even though it may be enduring to other people.
Exactly.
Yeah. And is there an idea, like, in a lot of these religions, there, especially in Eastern, there's kind of this quest of discovering who that true self is.
Right.
Does Taoism have that kind of spiritual journey and kind of personal struggle involved in figuring out who the true self is?
Well, that's indeed what a spiritual journey is all about, is to discover oneself. It's oftentimes mixed up or conflated with the physical journey. So many people would assume, as an example, that, oh, I have to take a pilgrimage
Mm-hmm.
to Asia, to China, to
Right,
Tibet, to India,
right.
to find that which I am searching for, that divine sacred aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, when they go there and they conduct their search, they realize that, well, actually, it's actually within me. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually inside of me all this time. I didn't really have to go out of my way.
Right. Yeah. I do think to be fair, and I've had people do Camino de Santiago or gone to monasteries, it's the structures around it which offers a certain amount of structure and rigidity so that you don't slip into your old ways, which is much harder to do. If you have habitual patterns that you're trying to remove, much harder to do. I think if you're in the I'm driving to work, I'm going to my job versus just being in an open field, with
Mhm.
bells ringing and chanting. I think it'd probably be easier in some ways. Maybe it's not. I don't know because I've never done the other path.
Well, people that have done it, they report that it's very helpful. After a while, when they come back from, let's just say, a silent retreat, it
Yeah.
takes them a while to adjust back into the daily grind.
Yeah.
Now, what I would point out is that they may be coming back feeling very tranquil and peaceful from the silent retreat. They're driving, back to their homes, and suddenly on the freeway, someone cuts them off,
Right.
and right away, all that peace is out the window, and the finger comes out,
Right.
the fist shaking.
Right.
So the real cultivation of the Tao is not dependent on an external factor, not an
Mm.
environment like out in the mountains, but rather it's work that is to be done within. It can be done when you live in a city because actually other people are a very good barometer of how far you have advanced.
Okay, and I want to talk about that later, but I want to go into so there's not really there's a true self, but not an equivalent of a soul or a spirit. And so the other question would be about, well, why are we here? What would the Taoists say about why are we even here on Earth?
Well, there are certainly many thoughts about that.
Yeah.
There are people who, from sort of a materialist, physical perspective, will say that, well, we're here to procreate, we're here to give rise to the next generation, that's it. There are also people from sort of a non-theist, skeptical perspective who will say, well, this is it. This is the one life that you have. Beyond this, there's nothing.
Right.
So I don't know if I buy these ideas exactly.
Hmm.
And the reason why I say that is based on observation of nature.
Hmm.
In nature, what we see everywhere we look is cycles. We also see that nature is perfect in a way, in that there's nothing wasted. Everything is endlessly recycled and reused in one form or another.
Hmm.
So let me point out a couple of things. Number one, even the most advanced science, we don't really have a very good grasp of what consciousness is.
Hmm.
We just know that we have it. We don't know how it comes about.
Hmm.
Number two, if after this lifetime you have learned all these lessons, you have perfected yourself somewhat from the time that you started taking on your spiritual quest, and then suddenly cut to black, suddenly fade away to oblivion,
Hmm.
suddenly it all goes to nothing.
Hmm.
That to me would be colossal waste. That to me would be not in accordance with the way that nature works.
Ah, okay, got it. Because nature would recycle.
Yeah.
Nature would recycle. You would be building upon that versus just whatever. I die, I rot, and it's over. That's the second. point of view. And the first, what was the first one you said? That's either you die and you rot. It's like
Well, well, that we're just here to procreate, biological procreation, giving rise to the next generation, etc.
right,
So now, of course, people who have that view will say that, well, of course you recycle because after you die, your body will decompose. The
right,
molecules of your body will end up as fertilizer for the plants.
right.
It'll even end up in other people down the road because that's how nature is. What I'm pointing out is that that covers the physical body. Now remember, the true self, that which doesn't change, that's not what your body is.
Right.
So there's something about you that is just you, no matter what. And that has additional understanding, that has accumulated more wisdom. What about that? Where does that go? How is that recycled?
Like you even think about a tree, right? A tree has a pine cone. It falls to the ground. The tree dies eventually, and that pine cone may actually sprout out to be a new tree, right? And that
Right.
tree is a derivative of the knowledge and DNA of the tree that bore that pine cone,
Yes.
right? And so it's constantly like, of course, I mean, of course, that little seed that started the second tree has within it a certain wisdom about living based on the first tree and what it, and the little pine cone that was dropped down. So why wouldn't we be doing the same thing?
Exactly. Now, in a sense, we come from nothing. Just like the pine cone, if you go back a few generations, it certainly did not exist.
Right.
It existed at that time as potential that will one day manifest. Many, many years ago, thousands of years ago, there was one particular pine cone that would end up growing into a pine tree
Right.
that will produce its own next generation, and it's just exactly the same for human beings.
Right. Yeah.
All developed from fertilized eggs, but several generations ago, those fertilized eggs did not even exist, as anything other than potential.
Right.
So we all come from nothingness in a sense, it goes back to the patterns of creation we talked about,
Right.
how the zero, the void, gives rise to the one.
Right. We come from nothingness or everythingness. It just depends on how you look at it. Okay, so
Yes.
I want to ask you about there's this whole idea about doing so you said the second part about Taoism, or really what Taoism was about, was actually helping you navigate and live in the world through observing cycles of nature. And so there's this whole idea in a lot of spiritual texts about doing and then being. And in your book, The Tao of Happiness, you mentioned a couple times about doing versus being, and I think a lot of I had interviewed a guy who's like he called it the TaoTe Ching, which is the philosophy of the dude, which is the guy from, from a movie, and his philosophy it was kind of boiled down to do nothing, like whatever when stuff happens, just roll with it, dude, that kind of that, and I think a Taoist may just be poking their eyes out if they heard this TaoTe Ching philosophy, because it's so. Is the Taoist about just being with what is and like sitting on the couch and just being a dude all the time? I mean, that to me seems so non-Asian to me.
Well, you and I, having come from an Asian
Yeah,
background, know that we're surrounded by relatives who are not thinking that way.
yeah.
It's
Work
quite the
hard,
opposite.
study hard. If you work hard and study hard, good things will happen. Like that's the Asian equation that it was all about doing. And then every now and then when stuff gets so bad, it's like, oh no, leave it alone. So it has this doing or being, but I'd say it's weighted 80% towards doing and like 20% towards being. But going back, tracing all the way back into the origins of some of this philosophy, what don't we understand about goal setting, free will, doing, and how is it complemented with being?
Well, the primary misconception in the West is that the Tao is about doing nothing. That comes from the expression Wu Wei, which is actually more properly translated as unattached action, actions without attachments. Now, it's that action is based on your observation of what's going on, and when you observe that actually nothing needs to be done, unattached action can be, in some cases, no action. In other cases, it can be minimal action, like a little reminder, a light touch, a nudge in the right direction. And that's all it takes. Now, there are certainly cases where the proper action is not just a simple nudge, but a plan, step by step, a project that you want to implement. So in the TaoTe Ching, that's described as a journey of 1,000 miles. That's a grand undertaking. In the book, The Tao of Happiness, it's described as a flight, the flight of a majestic giant bird that is completing a grand journey. So there are plenty of metaphors to justify the way that Asians are so incredibly diligent. But one thing too about these Asians is that, from what I have seen, from what you have seen, family members, relatives, Asians may be hardworking, but they're cheerful, positive, happy.
Yeah.
When they're engaged in these activities, they know where they're going, and that gives them a sense of joy.
So it isn't. So in a lot of spiritual texts, it's like, my will is thy will. It's about giving up your free will to flow with something greater, more majestic, more one with the flow of life. Does the Taoist have an idea about that kind of thing, or is that even a lifestyle that's part of life? Is that the being part of life?
Well, I would advise that when you, for instance, when you pray, you are assuming that someone is listening, or that someone is listening and cares and will do something, will take action, and that action will be effective and it's going to be done in a timely manner,
Right.
etc. So there's a lot of unknowns. But what you do know for a fact is that as you express your feelings, what you want to see happen in life, what you fear will happen, what you want to avoid, what you can be certain of is that your own higher self, to that higher self, your message is loud and clear. And you care about your problems. So a lot of times we say God helps those who help themselves. So I would call upon everyone's higher self to be the listening party, to take action. So it isn't just, praying. It isn't just asking for divine favors, but also taking whatever actions are appropriate in the human sphere so that you complete your own duties before expecting that you will be given, assistance from Providence.
Right. Okay. So this whole thing that's very popular among spiritual folks is this whole manifestation. I want the Cartier watch, or whatever it is. Oh, I want a Mercedes Benz. Whatever. Where you're trying to, maybe if I will it hard enough, I will create a quantum, reality that will mirror my own reality. What would a Taoist say to that construct of thinking?
Well, the universe mirrors you within. That's very literal. And it's also where the manifestation folks don't have a crucial piece of the puzzle. So if you are manifesting very hard from the couch,
Right.
you know, for something to appear,
Right.
but you are not manifestation, your manifestation is not powerful enough to get yourself off the couch and begin taking action toward that goal, the universe will emulate you exactly. It will also not be taking action on your behalf. So,
Ah, interesting.
but if on the
Interesting.
other hand, you begin to take meaningful steps, I want, this fancy car, so I'm going to start making up a plan on how I can conceivably do that. When you begin that action, suddenly all kinds of help comes your way. All kinds of things fall into place, into alignment with you. So before you know it, far sooner than anyone expects, what you are manifesting in your mind has manifested in reality.
Okay. All right. Interesting. All right. Now I want to go to taking a real life application because, there's a lot of conflict in this world. And we had talked right now, right where you live, there's gun shooting, probably minutes away from where you live. There's the Paris bombing. And now, a lot of conflict about, do we let immigrants in? Do we not let immigrants in? And people getting very strong and strident about their point of view. There's almost, I could probably spend the whole show listing all the political candidates and people being triggered by Donald Trump. There's racism, there's all this, just a litany of things in which conflict is just brewing. And I don't want to get into that because this is not about being into politics. So I'm going to take kind of an innocuous thing. But I think that this innocuous example can be applied to any of the examples that I just mentioned above. So I want to talk about a situation. You're a manager at work. You have a person who's in the meeting who you view is caustic and is causing a certain amount of, disruptiveness, disharmony within the whole office. You have someone who, and I think we all know who that person is, right? We have a person like, oh yeah, that person, a problem in the office. They're always, long litany of judgments. And then, and then can't we just do something with this person in the meeting? Can't we just shut this person up? Can't this person just be more positive? Whatever it is. Okay, so let's just take that example because that's probably, again, I think that could be applied to immigration. It could be applied to the political candidates. It's a general theme where you have a conflict with another person. Now, one of the chapters that you have in your book, The Tao of Happiness, has this idea of getting rid, you said, you're all consuming, so one of it is letting go of your attachment, of I view as being right, and you write, your all consuming attachment is not a person. It cannot love you, look after you, or care for you like a person can. So it's being attached to an idea. In this case, I'm right, you're wrong. And you talk about being attached. What would the Tao say about your attachments of being right? Like, you're right, that person's wrong, they're irritating me. What would I learn from the Tao?
Well, there are so many parts to that question. We'll tackle it one by one. That particular story about attachments is illuminating. Basically what that story is about this man who loves horses and is feeding a horse, and then one day, accident happens and the horse, kicks him and kills him. But the horse has no awareness that this owner of the horse is someone who loves horses with all his heart and continues on just being a horse. So it's like that with attachments. We may be so attached to something, but that something is not attached to us. And therefore, one day it can damage us, just like the horse powerful kick to the chest, killing the owner instantly. We can be injured, we can be harmed by the negative impact of that attachment. So that's very real. I also don't want to necessarily avoid talking about the Tao perspective on the attacks because there are some very solid ideas that can contribute to the way that we react to all of these, this violence, this hatred, this fear that's happening now in the world. It's probably the time that we need the Tao perspective more than ever.
Okay.
About that person at the office, which we all know who that is.
Right.
What I would advise to everyone is that there are no simple solutions. There's no clever comebacks that will defuse that person, defeat him, humiliate him in front of everyone. That'll happen in a movie. Unfortunately, our lives don't happen like Hollywood scripts.
Okay.
It's truly unfortunate. So does that mean that we have no choice but to suffer, this bully at the office, this domineering personality? Well, it doesn't mean that. What it does mean is that there's a reason for things that happen in life. There's a purpose. There's a reason for that person to have manifested in your existence. Now, this would be heaven if we don't have any obstacles, if we don't have any people that are so challenging, such challenging personalities. But that particular heaven will become boring very quickly. We will learn nothing. Everything we do is automatically successful because it is heaven. So after a while, we're bored out of our minds and we want to leave heaven to go someplace else. Now, in this world, we do have those challenges. They're there for a reason. So let me offer some possible reasons. There are lessons that we're here to learn, and people like that are a pretty good way. They're sort of like the weights that you find in a gym. Lifting those weights, not fun, okay? You see, you see people grimace, right?
Right.
You see guys like, bro, do you even lift? And
Right.
then next thing you know, they're like, ah! So not a whole lot of fun.
Right.
They do that though for specific reasons. They want to train themselves to become better, to be stronger, healthier, etc. So spiritually, if you think about this world as the gym of life, and we're here to train ourselves, to lift, to become healthier spiritually. So we won't do that by sitting around eating bonbons. That's
Right.
the unfortunate truth. We have to go through some pretty strenuous exercise to get there. So
Okay.
people like that think of them as the exercise.
Okay, so whether it's if you're not a fan of Trump, it may be Trump or Hillary. If you're not a fan of Hillary, they may be a challenge to you, or the bombers, or the person in the office that you know is the one that's irritating. View that as someone who is like a weight, forcing you to get stronger, better. That's one way of looking at it. But then what if you just get frustrated? That you get frustrated with that person and you want something to be done. The person steps over the line, right?
Mhm.
Someone bombing, innocent people in Paris. They've clearly stepped over the line. There's going to be instances at work where someone does something where they step over the line. How do you know, and you were talking about, how do you know whether to act? Whether the action is no action or the action is a small
Just a
shove,
nudge.
or if it's like a plan to put together a response. How does one know how would you approach that whole thing?
Well, I'll start out by talking about what is not the authentic Tao. The
Okay.
westernized version of the Tao may say that there's no absolute right or wrong, and therefore we can't sit in judgment of the terrorists, etc. Okay, so that would not be the perspective of the ancient masters from the old days of Tao philosophy in China. Those masters will not hesitate to assess a situation. They will insist on observing without attachments to make the best and clearest decisions possible about difficult situations.
Mm-hmm.
The assessment that they make, it's not yes or no, it's not black or white, it's usually a range, a spectrum of gray shades from positive to negative.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always in terms of benefits and welfare to humanity, to people as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
So we can easily adopt their perspective to take a look at the situation, and we can recognize that warfare, killing, violence, that's clearly very bad.
Right. It does not benefit the whole in any way.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So the action that we take. So you ask about the appropriate action.
Right.
So let me get people to think about what happens at the group level, what happens at the national level and individual level. Now, when we come together as a society, we human beings, very naturally will create entities meant for protecting the society itself or the community or the country.
Yeah, community rules or ethics or laws.
Law enforcement, the
Right.
sheriff's office,
Right.
police officers, the CIA, FBI, and on the national level, we have the military.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all natural byproducts of what happens when people come together.
Mm-hmm.
It is sort of, it's like the immune system for a larger
That's a great
body.
way of putting it. Yeah.
Fight off the infection, kill cancer, stuff like that. So there's nothing, good or bad about that or right or wrong. It just simply is the nature of things.
Right.
So following the terrorist attacks in Paris, we have seen the French government taking action. We have seen the French military launching airstrikes in Syria. We have seen the manhunts that took place.
Right.
We have seen the investigations that are still taking place now. We have seen the ringleader being dead, basically.
Right.
So these are all to be expected from the Tao perspective, because you cannot expect that the nation would not look after its own best interest in defending itself.
Okay.
Okay? So from the individual perspective, what the Tao says is that recognize that the people who are engaged in this task, the soldiers, the law enforcement officers, they have a grim job to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
When they're taking human lives, there's family, relative, friends who are affected by that loss of life as well. They're no less human beings than you or me. So while they do what they must do, what we demand that they do as a society, there's no reason for us to be cheering, to be cheerleading, to express, satisfaction or happiness or excitement. It's a grim business. Killing is always like that. Even when you do it out of necessity, there's no celebration.
But even if you use the analogy of an immune system, right? Sometimes your immune system goes awry and it kills healthy cells that it should not be. So you can make the parallel of, okay, you have police killing people who they should not be killing or abusing, and then abusing their given rights. What would the Tao say in that case? Because yes, you need police and an immune system to make sure that the overall system is healthy, but then sometimes those immune systems make mistakes.
Well, in our world, in healthcare, we have doctors who look into what's going on with your body and, let you know if the immune system is not doing what it should, or perhaps is ineffective, which maps to what we're seeing, with perhaps, reports of police brutality and so forth.
Right.
Now, there are, thanks to advance in science and medical knowledge, medical understanding, we have a variety of ways to address that kind of issue. In society, we have similar analogs to that. So we have, for instance, video cameras now.
Right.
And the good cops are the ones that welcome this because it's going to help them explain why they took a particular action and not have their actions be twisted out of context, and later on be turned back against them. It's no longer their word against the community. They now have video evidence to back them up. And on the other side of the coin, the bad cops who perhaps relied on, wanted that sense of power from ordering people around and then maybe rough them up a little bit, that video camera will capture that as well, and therefore they have to watch what they're doing. So that is analogous to healthcare professionals looking after your immune system. So we do have solutions, we do have ways, and here again, we see patterns of the Tao repeating itself at different levels of reality.
Okay, explain to me what you see as a pattern in that particular situation.
It's like the pendulum, swing back and forth. So when you veer too far off in one direction,
right,
you start to create the force to bring it back.
Okay, so let's say that, someone has a terrorist act, they swing it to one direction, and then what happens is over time there's going to be some other act to kind of swing it so that it reaches some type of equilibrium. So that's what the Tao would say, right? I mean, this is kind of a balancing of yin yang that's happening.
Well, the Tao is about equilibrium. So remember, we can only take that metaphor so far. We wouldn't want a pendulum of revenge back and forth that keeps on going no matter what, and I talked about movies just a little while ago, rather appropriate since I'm here in Burbank, not too far from Hollywood. Think about the movies with revenge as a theme. It's always, the someone who's been wronged and therefore you exact your vengeance, etc. Now, the next movie may be that somebody else is wronged and as a result of your actions and come back and take revenge against you. It's a never-ending cycle.
Right.
So in the Tao, it's about equilibrium, which means that we're happiest when we're in equilibrium, somewhere in the middle, away from the extremes. So the extremes in this case, in the context of the attacks, there's a couple of different extremes that we can imagine. One is pacifism. Do nothing, let it happen again, we deserve it, that type of pacifism. The other extreme is hatred and responding to violence with overwhelming violence. That's the other extreme. Okay. The middle part is what I call upon everyone to do, and that is the Tao perspective, the Tao response is not one of hatred, it's not one of fear, but one of empathy. Empathy for the victims, empathy to be directed into action, to protect, to defend, to prevent, to take measures to make sure that it doesn't happen again. There's a lot of energy that we can direct it into that, away from useless expressions of anger or hatred or discrimination against a particular group.
Yeah, I think of it almost as going back to in your book, The Tao of Happiness, you talk about how you can do things with ease, right? If you punch someone, they're going to punch you back. And that's not an easy, this is kind of a muscling around, right? I mean, and that doesn't, all it does is create another punch in the opposite direction, right? So if you come up with a plan to say, why is that person punching me in the first place? How can I protect myself from that punch? Like when they come punching, maybe you have a punching bag versus that they can just direct their energy towards versus, you punching back. There's probably a dozen strategies out there aside from just punching back. And so going back to what you said very early on, you said, you can either do nothing, like a pacifist situation. You could do a little ding, to kind of push something in a different direction, or you can have a very strong plan. How does one, like in the situation of the terrorist attack? I mean, what I heard you say, put a plan to defend, put a plan to understand, put a plan together. That would be kind of the plan piece. But what is the do nothing or do a ding, little ease? What would that be in these situations?
Well, different situations call for different levels of response, and it's always the appropriate level that we're looking for. So we can certainly run the risk of doing too little or doing too much. And
Okay.
there's going to be times when we want to err on the side of caution, of safety. So with the gun violence, for instance, we started talking about all the shooting that's been taking place. I want to let people know that it's not like that in other parts of the world. There are certainly parts of the world where it's even more dangerous than it is in the United States, no doubt about that. I'm talking about countries that have been influenced by the Tao, that live under some of the principles, some of the philosophies. So if you go to Japan as an example, that's a very safe society. If you travel to Taiwan, you quickly discover that you can be safe there no matter where you happen to be. In the worst neighborhood, you are safer than you can be in Beverly Hills over here. And in Japan, little kids, we're talking little kids that are like 7, 8, 9 years old, routinely travel themselves over great distance. Without worrying about what's going to happen to them. And people take that for granted. So, pardon me, so they enjoy a certain kind of freedom there. Freedom of movement, freedom from having to worry about personal safety. So I use the word very specifically freedom because here, when we talk about, guns and so forth, that word is going to be used quite a bit as well. Well, I want the freedom to, have...
My gun, or right, to protect myself if I need to.
Exactly.
Wait, but are you using an example, because my question was about gentle, hard, very a plan, how does that map? I'm having problems connecting your answer to the question.
So the skillful actions of the Tao can sometimes create a much bigger result than the effort. So you don't need to strain, or you don't need to devote a lot of resources to create the positive results that you are looking for. So one example that comes to mind is that when we express support for the people of Paris, what is the effective way of doing that? And if you were to ask the Parisians themselves, some people say, well, I will pray for you. And the Parisians will say, well, no, actually, we've had too much religion already. But they appreciate us thinking about them and expressing that we stand with them. So I'll use another example where minimal action has a very dramatic impact. Think about what happens in the schoolyard when the bully is pushing a kid that the bully intends to pick on. Okay, the bully has a plan that if the kid gets mad and strikes back, then the bully has all the reasons in the world to pulverize the kid. Okay, that's the plan. So I use that as sort of the analogy of terrorists wanting to provoke, wide open warfare as a recruiting tool. Now, the most effective thing for the other kids, what I know in playgrounds, what happens most often is that the other kids will stand around and watch.
And just watch, not knowing what to do.
And just watch.
Right.
But if you think about the minimal action that the other kids can do, suppose they stand together with the kid that's being bullied, stand up to the bully, and say, we don't think this is acceptable. We're united against you. Okay? Now, the bully not getting what he wanted is, whoa, I can't take on all these people at once. Okay, back down. Yeah, you better run, you coward, and it goes away. So,
okay, got it. So like the simple thing of just people standing around, analogous to the Paris thing of just stand and support. Don't pray, that doesn't do anything for me. Just basically stand with me, and that's very simple. Doesn't take a lot of energy, effort, doesn't take guns. It's just show me that you're there. Interesting.
And that is what the terrorists do not want, is for all the potential victims to stand together and be united.
Okay, got it. That's a wonderful analogy. We've have Derek Lin, who's talking about his book, The Tao of Happiness. We're going to be taking some of the questions that we got during the show from Derek. Thanks for your patience. Okay, so here's some of the questions. So one was, they were asking if it was a religion, and what I heard you say, it was more of a philosophy. Taoism is more of a philosophy. And is this a level of study? So I assume as, what is the depths of Taoism as you pursue it over time?
There are many things about Taoism that are not immediately obvious and that can seem counterintuitive. But when you look deeper into it, you realize that they make a lot of sense. And those that want to practice the Tao as a religion, there's nothing to stop them from doing so. That would be their individual path. And I personally have many people in my life that are practicing the Tao religiously. So absolutely nothing wrong there. I respect them just as I respect all great traditions of spirituality.
What does it mean to practice religiously? And what does that mean? Like they make these laws of conduct, or what does that mean?
More emphasis on ritual, more emphasis on external entities. So as an example, because Buddhism and Taoism have intertwined throughout so much of Chinese history, many Tao followers also have, for instance, figurines of the Buddha in their homes.
Okay, got it.
They may choose to pray to the Buddha.
Okay, so there are actually rituals and customs and practices that make it more like a religion. And are these Taoists in nature, or is these, have it akin to the stuff that you're familiar with, the people who do practice it religiously?
Well, again, different variations of Taoism. In religious Taoism, Lao Tzu is seen as an entity and given a grand title, 太上老君, the supreme elder lord. So he's been elevated to the status of a deity, and so they worship him and pray to him. I just want to point out, I don't follow that path because I know that in the original TaoTe Ching, there's no mention from Lao Tzu about himself being a deity, a prophet, or any other divine figure. Not a savior, not a messiah.
But if you want to do it, go for it. If it's part of your study and practice. And how long does, because I've heard people reading and rereading the TaoTe Ching, like years upon years, each time getting more depth. Going back to the question is what's the level of study? And how long have you been studying the Tao, and how's your practice of Taoism deepened over time?
For me, it's been 20 years.
Wow.
And so the bad news that I have for everyone is that if you choose to study the Tao, it's going to be a lifelong journey. It's a lifelong pursuit. The good news is that it's going to be never-ending fun, never-ending discoveries about yourself, about other people. So it's something that you won't really see as a burden, as work, but something that you gladly undertake.
I talked to Thomas More, who wrote The Care of the Soul, and he had said that he just reads a Tao-Te Ching. Like he may contemplate a passage from the Tao-Te Ching, over a month period or over a period of time. How do you take the texts that you've read, and how do you deepen your understanding of them?
One difference between me and most people in the West that study the Tao Te Ching is that I have the ability to go back to the original ancient
Because you
text
can read
and
Chinese, yeah.
I'll read that directly and I'll know what it means and what it says. And I have access to these masters that know what they're talking about, that have done it all their lives, and also volumes of commentaries written in modern Chinese to explain the meaning of ancient Chinese. So I I have that as my advantage, whereas people may be working with a translation written by a translator that doesn't have access to all of that, and therefore many of the translations are guesses. You know, here's what I think he meant.
Okay, got it. So what you're studying for your particular path, you actually read the original text as a way of deepening your understanding of what they may have meant. Okay, and then so the other set of questions was, how do we identify the true self?
Well, think about this you. I mean, you know what I mean when I talk about you.
Yeah.
You know that it's not represented by your bank account. You can lose that bank account and you can still be you. It's not the clothes that you wear because you can change into different clothes and you're still you. You can get older. You can have different change. I can lose my hair. I can lose all my hair and still be me. So my hair is not me. I'm glad to say. So think about everything that is not you. The true self is not something that we can easily define with words, just like the Tao. The Tao is not something that can be completely defined with words. It's something that has to be experienced.
So,
So,
and really, it's about experiencing life, like you were talking about early in the show, as a way of discovering true self. Because when you experience life through the challenges, through the good times, through being old, through young, what is the enduring true self that is there throughout all of it?
throughout all of that, all the different experiences that you've had,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So someone was asking, is studying ourselves? It's not really studying. I guess it's experiencing in life and and deepening our understanding of ourselves through that process. Someone had asked, are you saying we need to study ourselves to know the true self? But it's more like experiencing life, I think, so that
Yeah,
you can understand who the true
yeah,
self
great.
is.
Great example for my own life is that when I went to college, you know, I had, so I went to an all-boy Catholic high school.
Hmm.
So my high school career was that of a very repressed teenager. So
Okay.
when I went to college, you know, I thought, now I can really cut loose. So when the admission office asked, what dorm did I want to be put into? And this is the Claremont College's private college.
Hmm.
I said, give me the one that has a reputation for parties, wild and crazy parties. And they did exactly as I asked. They put me into, so there on campus, there's different dorms, and the one that had the reputation for wild parties was the West dorm.
Uh-huh.
The West dorm is divided into different suites. Different suites have its own history. There's the mushroom suite because that's what people did. They did a lot of mushroom. My suite was the zoo suite.
The zoo
That's
suite. Okay.
that's where the wild and crazy guys are.
Yeah.
So I did that because I did not really know myself. I thought that I wanted to have fun.
Great.
Now, about half a year into it, I realized that it really wasn't me to party as
Mm.
much as I thought I wanted to party. What I really cherished more than partying was actually quiet contemplation. I did not know that before.
Right. Right.
So, with life experience, I deepened my own understanding of what I really want. So,
And is that when someone asks, how do we start the search for the true self?
well, one great way to start is by getting that book.
Yeah, the Tao of
from
Happiness.
Amazon,
Yeah.
and use that as a springboard for ideas.
I think you can start anywhere, right? I think your book,
Yes.
starting the Tao of Happiness, is. I actually think it's a really good place to start because it talks in the very beginning about traveling a spiritual journey, which is not one that most people, travel. So, in some ways, what it does is it prepares you for the obstacles that you'll face when you actually travel a spiritual journey, and then offers a lot of spiritual concepts about, like, all the high level concepts of traveling a spiritual journey are in that book. So
Yes.
I know you're saying is to plug your book, but to plug your book again, I would say that it is a really good primer. It is really a good place to start. Okay, and the question, okay, this is a perfect question for you, Derek. How long does it take to reach peace? Oh my goodness.
Peace can be as elusive as something that requires years and years, or it can be as obtainable as this very instant. That's the nature of the search. That's the nature of spirituality.
Hmm.
And so it depends on how we look at it. It depends on your individual situation. What you cannot let go of, what is occupying your attention, your mind,
Hmm.
the skills that you have in directing that attention to
Hmm.
what will be most helpful to you. So quite a few factors involved here.
Yeah, and I think I've had times when I've had a situation that I've been very conflict ridden with, and it can be just literally one session in my mind where I coach myself out of that belief and everything changes in just that, in an hour's time. It could be something that I've been holding that's so dear to what I understand my true self to be, which is not my true self, that it could take years to kind of unwind it, or it may never unwind, right? I mean, I'm a control freak. I'm accepting that that is a part of my nature, and it may or may not change, but it's changed gradually over time, very small incremental pieces. And so I've gotten more peaceful, but I don't, so will you ever reach, what does it even mean to reach peace, right? I've been more peaceful. Am I reaching the, like, enlightened master peaceful? Probably not. All right, so I have a question, last question for you. What if we think bad or evil thoughts at times or wish harm on others? How does that work out? So what happens if we are thinking, I'm just so pissed off at Donald Trump, or the terrorists we need to go and kill them all. I mean, I think that those are kind of natural initial responses to when you see violence like that.
Yeah, so the first thing that I would say is don't try to repress yourself. Don't try to deny that these thoughts exist and that you have thought them. To deny yourself, to suppress them is actually the very opposite thing.
Hmm.
So rather than to block them, to stop yourself from thinking them, the better way is to approach with understanding, by finding out more, by understanding more. So these thoughts occur to you for a particular reason. It's a signal to you that you want to get more information on that particular topic.
Yeah, so
It's a
instead of
sig-
using the evil thoughts or thinking bad things as I'm bad, therefore I am bad, and I shouldn't be thinking these, so I'm going to try not to think any of these things because it means I'm a bad person. Think, wait, these thoughts are signaling me to dig deeper inside. Why is it that I have so much hatred? Why do I have hatred? Why do I have anger? What is it about Donald Trump that makes me this angry?
yeah, it's a cue for reflection, correct?
Yeah, cue for contemplation, reflection. Fantastic. Thank you, listeners. And thank you so much again for being on the show. Great, 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 great wisdom. And make sure, tell us your website again, Derek Lin, DerekLin.com.
That's exactly right.
Okay, and I love the idea, Tao of Happiness. Spread a little bit of Christmas happiness and cheer. It's not because it's not a religion. You can send it to anyone. You can send the Tao of
Exactly.
Happiness to a Christian or a Muslim or a Buddhist, right?
I have people listening to me every Sunday who come from those backgrounds, Christian, Muslim. I also have atheists listening to the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So it is something that can literally appeal universally.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. I would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.